Fırlatera. Mu. Saizi. Kill. We look puzzle, look puzzles. Oh, here the bubbles goes. Saizi, the bubbles. Was das so verrassen? Was ist also? Ja, sondern Figazano, Versetzer, Tazona, Itera, Jeshia, Zuna, Pelusia Bete.
Little King's Story is yet another example of a Wii game that tries its absolute hardest to try and offset the massive imbalance of garbage shovelware titles for the system. The story itself follows a nameable child who ends up following a family of rats that he chased out of his house into the woods. Once in the woods, he gets completely lost and finds himself a gold crown. Upon placing the crown on his head, he is named the one true king of the world, and from then on out, he sets off on a quest of absolute and total world domination. I'm not even joking, that is absolutely 100% the idea of the game. But the world is much bigger than you realize. And that's one of the biggest themes of this game, is the absolute sheer sense of scale that this world has. Because you're one tiny king who alone cannot do much, fighting larger countries and larger monsters, but together with your subjects, you can form one giant unstoppable entity that can take over the world. The game itself is a real-time tactical squad-based strategy game. The nearest comparable game I could think of is something like Pikmin, although I think this game is far better. The idea is every day you wake up, you go to your throne, you check your mail, you see if you've got any quests, maybe you use your funding to improve your town, and after that, you're basically free for the day. The key goals in mind are completing quests, taking over bits of the world, collecting taxes, treasure hunting, and not only usurping other kingdoms, but rescuing princesses and doing quests for them as well. Now I know that's a lot to take in at once, but to help you achieve your many objectives, you have many different followers. In fact, as you progress through the game, you have about 20 different unit types to choose from. Stuff like the carefree adult, which can't do much but dig holes, to the lumberjack, which cuts down trees to allow you to progress further in the world. They tend to fall into one of two different categories. Utilitarian, such as the farmer or the carefree adult, which is useful mainly for treasure hunting, gathering resources, and generally allowing you to fund your campaign of destruction and world domination. And combat types, such as the soldier or the hunter. And the neat thing about all these units is that they all have their own unique specialties. For example, if you're going out into combat, you could make an entire team of soldiers, but that might not necessarily be wise, because your opponent might be out of your reach. An extreme way to counteract this problem would be to make an entire team of hunters, armed with bows, but the problem with the hunters is, while they can attack enemies at a distance, and therefore are much less likely to get hurt, they fight with a set amount of ammo, and if they run out, well, they try and punch the monster, and being a ranged type, they tend to get their asses kicked quickly. No matter what your current objective is, be it trying to take out another kingdom or just treasure hunting, it's always important to have a balanced team in order to handle any situation that may arise. And because there's such a wide variety of units that each have their own specialties, it requires you to have a constant understanding of your environment, as well as what your exact plan of attack is. So it's important to have a nice mix of units, and because of all the different types, there's an almost endless number of strategies you can come up with. Now, another big aspect of gameplay is treasure hunting. You can get treasure from doing almost anything in this game. Killing monsters, digging up holes, chopping down trees. Pretty much everything will leave you treasure, which needs to be appraised once you get back to your treasury. Now, the interesting thing about it is each piece of treasure that you find, once appraised, has its own different unique classification. And I'm just going to stop here and say, what is slig meat? Actually, you know what? That's something that might just horrify me if I know, so I don't want to know what slig meat is. But there are incredible numbers of just different collectibles to find in this game and appraise, all worth an insane amount of money, which you need to help further your cause by building homes which will allow you to have more units, or buying different training facilities, which will allow you to specialize your units. Now, the last aspect of gameplay I haven't touched on yet are the boss fights, and unfortunately, you won't be seeing too much footage of the really neat ones, but the boss fights in this game are ridiculously fun. Like, yes, you have a few straight up fights which are basically just kill this enemy, but a lot of the boss fights are actually handled completely differently. Off the top of my head, I remember two that stood out specifically to me. One boss fight basically just being a game of pinball, and another one that was basically a foot race up a mountain. And the neat thing is, while these boss fights basically turn the genre on its head and introduce completely different genre gameplay to the game, it doesn't ever betray the base mechanics of the game. The game still plays the way it always has. They just repurposed the mechanics to work slightly differently. And the fact that they were able to utilize the same basic mechanics but basically present you a completely different game, even for a very short period of time, speaks to the creativity of the team behind this game. The only thing gameplay-wise that I wholly don't enjoy about Little King's story is the AI pathfinding is a little bit dumb. For example, you will sometimes lose your units while trying to walk up a flight of stairs. Like, they just won't get that you're trying to walk up the flight of stairs, and they'll try and go around it and get caught on the stairs. That's a little bit annoying. Likewise, occasionally I ran into a situation where my builders would just stop building and walk away. So you kind of have to micromanage them a little bit more than I felt was necessary. It was a little annoying by the end of it. The presentation of Little King's story is really good. Visually, this game is quite pretty, and even in dull green fields, there's always enough splash of color from flowers all around to make this game visually stimulating. And the fact is, while you won't be looking too closely at each individual unit you have, they all have their own different look. They have their own different haircuts, mustaches, facial features, hair color. Even if you make each character the same unit, they're still going to look visibly different, and that is fantastic. I'm also a big fan of how your characters look visibly different as they get more damaged. They'll lose bits of their outfit, and your character will actually visibly age as he takes damage, which is a neat little feature that you might not notice right away. I'm also a big fan of the fact that each individual unit is very visibly different from the others. Depending on the class of the unit, you can tell exactly what it is at any point simply because of its outfit. You're not going to have to muddle around trying to figure out what each character does because they look slightly similar. The fact that they made each character visibly different so that you could tell at a glance what each character does is fantastic art design that incorporates itself quite well into the gameplay. And while I'm talking about visual presentation, you have collectible concept art to find, and once you find it all, you are presented with a special boss fight against a fan-designed monster that was won in a contest. Audio-wise, the soundtrack is really well produced. Pretty much all of the tunes are classical music, which I think lends itself quite well to the medieval fantasy theme that this game tries to uphold. The one thing about the audio design I'm not a big fan of is the fact that your characters don't stop talking, and while it's kinda cute and quirky, it does get old quickly. And that's Little King's story. It's a fantastic little Wii strategy adventure type thing that I'm quite fond of. In fact, if I had to make that call right now, I would say this is probably my favorite game on the system, period. And I highly recommend that if you're looking into picking up games for the system, absolutely grab this one. It's not wildly expensive, and I think it's a fantastic game overall. And if nothing else, it is the absolute best Pikmin game ever made.